We go. All right. I'm ready now. Good morning. Welcome to New Life. Thanks for being here this morning. You guys all know at this point we're in the middle of our very long series of messages called The Jesus Project. We took a couple weeks off for Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. Pastor Tyler last week delivered the message, talked about what it looked like to serve, that we have an identity problem, not a serving problem. I loved it. It was great. Really great message, and I appreciate that so much. But I'm also happy to be back and ready to preach to you guys this morning. So we're going to kind of continue on. I think I had told you we're going to be in a very long, kind of extended section in John's Gospel for the next couple of months together as we work through what happens around the Last Supper. So last week, Pastor Tyler talked about that moment when Jesus sort of got down and washed his disciples' feet and then began to serve them the Lord's Supper, and kind of talk to them about that last dinner and what it meant for him to share that with them and what it meant for them to share with him. And then around that, inside of John's gospel, he's got just all this unique material, this sort of insider perspective as an eyewitness to those moments of the things that Jesus said to his disciples around that supper. And so that's where we're going to be for the next couple of months together, is in that extended farewell discourse that Jesus has with his disciples. These are, in some ways, you could think of these as kind of Jesus's last words with his disciples in that private kind of setting, sitting around that table and enjoying that meal and sharing that meal together and talking about the significance of what that would be. And most of you guys have experienced at some point in your life, and I've experienced at different points in my life, a person who is close to you who actually didn't turn out to be quite as close to you as they said they were going to be. We've all experienced some measure of betrayal, some measure of a person who said they were going to do something and then they didn't follow through, some measure of a person who said they were going to be something and then didn't follow through on that. I'm one of my, I don't know, if I were to sort of share my core values, and those of you guys who know me well enough know that for me, loyalty and trust is like pretty high up there. It's one of those things that I value significantly. I love when people show loyalty and trust. I'm the sort of person that is a loyal and trustworthy sort of person, I think. I mean, you could, if you give me feedback if you think I'm not, but I think that that's the kind of person I am. I place a great value for myself personally on just being close and loyal and trustworthy for the people that I am close to. I have a relatively small circle of people that I consider to be my people. But I will bleed for those people. Like I would give my life for those people because they mean that much to me. And I will confess, and you've experienced and I've experienced, that when someone who feels like they were in that place, in that really close circle, doesn't respond, doesn't react, doesn't turn out the way that you thought they were going to, it is potentially, at least for me, it's like heartbreaking. It feels like in those moments, it feels like your world, my world, is falling apart. I've experienced a lot of betrayal and frustration and hurt and anger that goes along with this. And now this is the part where I'm going to be really vulnerable for you, right? You guys got all uncomfortable for a minute. If someone hurts me, I know that this is so not Jesus-y, this is so not pastory, but we'll just whisper it and hope that no one sees this. I hope that they hurt in return. And I'm probably not the only one, but I would guess, right, like if we were all to whisper a little bit about someone, and as soon as we started talking about that, you've got a person, or you've got a someone, or you've got a few someones that sort of come to your mind, and there's a piece of you as a human being, right, if we were just all to admit it, that when they hurt you, there's a part of you that's like, I hope that you get what's coming to you someday for the way that you treated me. Because I felt like, and you felt like, I've given a significant part of myself. I've given something of myself over to this other person, and then they didn't treat that part of myself the way that I had hoped that they would, the way that I expected they would, the way that I know that they should have treated that part of myself that I had trusted with them. And so because of the way that I respond with frustration and with anger, but underneath all of that frustration and anger is just this baseline emotion. This is sort of what I've learned about myself, is I'm just hurt. It's painful to work through that experience of having people that you thought were always going to be part of your life walk out of your life. And no matter how much I convince myself and no matter how much I try to talk myself into it, there's still that part of me, right? That's feeling like you deserve something bad. I hate this about myself. You deserve something bad to happen to you because of the things that you did to me, right? Like that's just a very human emotion. I don't think I'm saying anything that you wouldn't expect about me, and I don't think I'm saying anything that you haven't experienced on some level or another, because all of us have experienced that betrayal, and I think some of us have different degrees of ability to sort of separate that. Some of you are just better people than I am, and I'll admit that. I accept that. I embrace that. I'm totally okay with that. You're like, I just let it go. I just rolled off my back. I was like, fine. I need to have a conversation with you about how you got there. But if we were to share stories, right, this morning, we were to say, well, this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to me. I suspect that we might actually get ourselves into trouble because you would tell me your story and I'd be like, man, that person, and then I would get fired up for you. And if I were to tell you my story, you'd get a little fired up for me and you'd be like, man, that person really deserves, and then we would get ourselves into an unhealthy place. This morning, what we're going to try to do is get ourselves out of that unhealthy place that we tend to get into. And we're going to focus on this moment, and you sort of know right where we're going, right? Which is that Jesus experiences that deep level of betrayal, that deep level of a person that he had invested in, a person that he's given something of himself over to, who decides at the end of this whole story that he doesn't want to be part of the Jesus movement. He doesn't want to be part of the things that Jesus has taught and led them into, and all of these things that Jesus has been building up to, and he's been pouring so much of himself out into especially these 12 disciples who have been so close to him. And then one of them, you know the story, one of them decides that he's going to jump ship at the very last moment, and not just jump ship, not just decide that he doesn't want to be in there with the rest of the guys, but he's going to actively turn Jesus over to the people who will eventually crucify him. And this morning, what I'm going to ask you to do is something that is a little bit difficult, but I'm going to ask you, don't focus on Judas. Instead, I want to focus on Jesus, because if we focus on Judas, we're going to spin ourselves up into this, unhealthy place. But if we allow ourselves to focus on Jesus, I think we're going to see something remarkable. We're going to see something extraordinary, because in the process, in the moment in which Jesus experiences this deepest level of betrayal from someone who's close to him, we have the context for maybe one of Jesus's most extraordinary statements, maybe one of the most important things that Jesus would say, maybe one of those most vital last words that he would communicate to his disciples, one of those things that they heard and they felt like was Jesus's ringing commandment to them for the rest of their lives. It shaped how they were supposed to live in relationship with each other, and it comes out of Jesus's moment of betrayal. So here's how the story continues from where we left it off last week, that after saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit. And he testified, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. And the disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples whom Jesus loved, that's John's way of talking about himself, which we've talked about before. Maybe he's got like a little ego issue going on here. One of the disciples, the one that Jesus loved, he was reclining at table at Jesus' side. Just so, in case you were wondering, he was the one closest to Jesus at the Last Supper, right? Like he's just emphasizing this point. The one who Jesus loved was reclining at table at Jesus' side. And so Simon Peter, who was farther away, just in case you missed that, had to motion to the one that Jesus loved to ask him of whom Jesus was speaking. And so that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is he to whom I will give the morsel of bread when I have dipped it. And so when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, what you are going to do, do quickly. Now no one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. And so after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. Jesus has already demonstrated, like we talked about last week, his willingness to take up the place of a servant. He understood who he was. He had come from God. He was going back to God. And his last act of love for his disciples, he got down and he washed their feet. He served them to the end. And while Da Vinci's famous painting of the Last Supper has all of the disciples seated at a really long table, you all know what that looks like, right? That's probably not how it looked. I hate to break it to you, that's a very Italian Renaissance way of thinking about the Last Supper. That's not what happened. In fact, they probably sat at a low table that was in a U shape, and they would all have sat on cushions and surrounded this U-shaped table, and Jesus would have sat in the center because he was sort of the family head of this gathering. And so sitting there in the center, we know John was sitting at least on one side, was leaning up against him. They were all sort of reclining as they experienced this supper together. Very, sort of very familial sort of feeling in this place that they shared this Last Supper together. And as they reclined at the table, they would have conversed and they would have talked back and forth with each other. And you can imagine the stories that they would have been telling and the way that they would have been talking about the things that they had experienced, but also the way that they were feeling in those moments as they were in Jerusalem, inside the city, celebrating the Passover. And then Jesus chooses this moment to say, hey, by the way, one of you, my family, sitting at the table, is going to betray me. One of you is going to blow up our entire world. One of you is going to take this community that we've created, and you are going to turn it upside down. And now Jesus has already sort of alluded to this at different times with the disciples as we've gone through the last couple of months together. We've seen Jesus say, hey, look, I'm going to be crucified. The Son of Man's going to be turned over. The Son of Man's going to be handed over to those who are going to execute him. But this is the first moment, I think, that the disciples start to fully grasp and fully understand what Jesus is saying and what Jesus means by this. And even if they understood what he meant, I don't think that they understood the timing of it. I don't think that they knew that this was like a thing that was not just, distant future. This was like a immediate future experience for them. Which of them, right, sitting in that room, if you can put yourself in the room, which of them was thinking, this is the moment and this is the room from which betrayal would happen? They might have thought it was one of the Pharisees. They thought it was somebody on the outside, somebody in the outskirts, someone who was sort of, relatively loosely associated with the Jesus movement. Which one of them thought, well, one of our guys that we've shared our lives with for the last 3+ years together is going to betray our Lord, our King, the one that we have sort of all put our hope and our trust and our future into? And the other gospel writers tell us the same thing that John tells us, which is that Jesus' statement about his impending betrayal causes this commotion within the disciple group where they start to talk. But John records this little sort of sidebar conversation that he and Peter had where Peter's like, hey, John, find out who it is. Now, if you know Peter, right, you might think, well, Peter's got a reason for trying to find out who it is. Because if Peter's going to get his way, if Peter's going to get his opportunity, he's probably going to try to stop it. Like, hey, if I find out who it is, then maybe we can stop this thing from happening. Maybe we can sort of, put that, thread back on the spool again, and we cannot let that whole sort of thing unwind for us. John asks Jesus. Jesus tells John, and everybody watches, but Peter and John are the ones who know that when he dips the bread in the cup, it's Judas. And in some ways, again, our attention is drawn towards Judas, but what's so relevant and so remarkable is Jesus' response to all of this, and Jesus' response to Judas in particular. How many of you guys have seen the Godfather films? If you grew, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. This is a church where you can admit that you saw movies. There are other churches you couldn't admit that, but if you saw the Godfather films, if you've ever seen the second Godfather film, there's a moment in the middle of the film where Michael Corleone, the head of the family, has learned that it was his brother Fredo who was responsible for passing on the information that led to an assassination attempt on him. Does anybody remember this? They're dancing in Cuba. They're celebrating the New Year. And as they're celebrating, Michael goes over to his brother Fredo and he pulls him close and he says this. He says, I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. He says, I know it was you. He kisses him on the cheek. He says, I know it was you. You broke my heart. And if you're you know the movie, you know how the film's going to go. You know that that's the kiss of death. That's Michael saying goodbye to his brother, because at some point at some point, Michael's going to have his revenge. That is how we respond. Right? Like that's the very human response. When someone betrays you, someone passes you over, someone hands you over, you understand that someone has walked away from you, someone has been disloyal to you. That's the very human response. It's a perfectly delivered line inside of the movie. It's just such a critical moment inside of the film. And it captures how all of us feel in those moments. I know it was you, and once I know it was you, you're dead to me. But Jesus doesn't do what Michael Corleone does. He doesn't do what I would do, and he doesn't do what you do. Here's what he does. Jesus pulls Judas close. And we almost get the impression that Judas was the one on the other side of Jesus, because he's close enough that he can talk to him. And he pulls him close and he says this, what you're going to do quickly. Instead of, I know it was you, Judas. I know it was you. You broke my heart. He says, what you're going to do quickly. And he sort of nullifies Peter's sort of instinctual response to try to take vengeance. He nullifies the response of everybody in the room who's like, we're going to find out who it is that's betrayed him, and we're going to, we'll take care of him. We'll make sure that he doesn't see the light of day. Jesus forgoes vengeance in favor of love. It's such a powerful moment where Jesus sits at the table. I know it was you, Judas. You broke my heart. But what you're going to do, I'm not going to stop you. Can you imagine that moment? Because for you and for me, right, if I knew you were going to break my heart, if I knew that was how the story was going to go, and I knew that I could stop it in that moment, and I know, right? Like most of us would choose to try to stop it. We'd say, what you're going to do, don't do. What you're about to do, don't do, because as soon as you do the thing that you're about to do, you're setting in motion a thing that for us is the death of this relationship. For us is the death of this whole thing. It's turning this whole thing upside down. And Jesus pulls Judas in close and says, what you're about to do quickly. The one with all of the power to stop the events that were about to be set in motion refuses to do it. Don't focus on Judas. Get all caught up in Judas' betrayal. Judas stabbed Jesus in the back. Judas turned Jesus over to the officials and the authorities. Don't focus on Judas. Look at Jesus. Look what Jesus does. Jesus forgoes vengeance in favor of love. And John, when he writes the story, John's he's a good writer. He's putting this whole story together. And he says that as soon as this was over, and Judas went out, and he says, and it was night. And now John does this. He makes little sidebar comments. He likes to tell us what time it was and what day it was and where we were and what season. And this is John's little way of saying, not just it was nighttime, but I think this is John's way of saying it was night inside of the room, and it was night inside of the soul of the person who had looked at the one that he had loved and the one who loved him so much and had walked away from the one who had said, I'm the light of the world, and as long as you walk with me, you're walking in the light. As long as you're with me, you're walking in the day. And as soon as you leave, Judas, as soon as you walk out the door, it's like night closes around you that you can't escape from. And Jesus, knowing all of that, lets him go. And when he had gone out, Jesus said to the other disciples, the ones who were left, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. And if God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. John, buddy, help us out here. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. And so a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Having chosen not to stop Judas out the door, Jesus now turns to the other 11 men left in the room and says, I'm in the middle of my moment of greatest betrayal. I am about to suffer. I am agonizing over the loss of the one who's been close to me and close to all of us. And now in this context, in this moment, I'm going to give you the last great commandment. I'm going to tell you the one thing that you cannot forget if you want to follow me. The one thing that you can't miss if you want to be my disciple. In this moment, I want you to love each other as I've loved you. Watch what I just did. See what I just did. I didn't seek vengeance on the one who hurt me. Instead, I loved him. And in loving him, I loved you. And in loving you, I loved the world. And in me and in this moment, now, the Son of Man is glorified. Now God is being glorified in the actions that I'm about to take. This is the moment. John said it at the beginning of chapter 13. It says, Jesus had loved his own, and having loved them, he loved them to the end of himself. He'll demonstrate the most powerful, central ethic of his community and of his movement, the most public and powerful way imaginable. Because as Jesus speaks these words to his disciples, Jesus, as the king of his kingdom, is giving to his citizens a lasting command. Love one another as Jesus loved you. You're to love one another, Jesus says, as I've loved you. I would not save myself for your benefit. I would not seek vengeance. I wouldn't seek my way. I wouldn't seek my will. I wouldn't seek what's good for me at the expense of what's good for you. And so I'm asking you, for the rest of your lives, you 11 guys and every other disciple who's going to come and be part of this group of 11 people that's turned into billions of people across the planet today, the command that Jesus gave to his citizens on that day has not been rescinded. He wasn't like, oh, I'll take it back when they really hurt you. And those Christian people, and when they're really abusive and they really don't treat you the way that they're supposed to, and they're not loyal to you, and they hurt you and they break your heart, you pull them close and say, I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. And then you get back at them. Jesus says, this is how you demonstrate your participation in my kingdom. You obey this command. Love one another as Jesus loved you. If you want to demonstrate yourself as a disciple of Jesus, there's a lot of marks that we tend to use to sort of, kind of mark ourselves out as Christians. Jesus gave us one. Give us one. Really simple command. Now, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. But he just gave us one simple command. He said, by this, if you do this, everyone will know that you belong to me. That you love each other in the same way that I have loved you. There are other places where we're commanded and where Jesus talked about and Jesus taught, and the disciples and the apostles and the early church writers talked about loving one another outside of the Christian community. And I think that's super important. I think it's so significant. I don't want you to hear us saying, love each other in here and hate everybody out there. That's not the message. But the defining mark of a Jesus-following movement and a Jesus follower is that they are willing to love each other at the expense of themselves. It's that they don't assert their way, and they don't need to push themselves to the front, and they don't need to seek vengeance, and they don't need to seek getting back at those people who have hurt them and injured them and done harm to them. Are you willing, Jesus is saying, to love each other with a radical, self-giving kind of love? Because this is what marks the disciples of Jesus, is that they love each other in the same way that Jesus has loved them. They recognize that Jesus has loved them in a way that was not good for himself in that sense, right? Like he allowed Judas to walk out the room, set in motion the events that were going to lead to his ultimate crucifixion, bore the shame and the humiliation of the cross for people like you and people like me. And Jesus says, now, if you want to follow me in that way. Don't follow me by thumping your Bible at people. Don't follow me by going to church. I mean, all of those things are important. Don't follow me by those things. Follow me and demonstrate that you follow me because you love each other in such a radical, self-sacrificial kind of way that everyone who looks at you is like, you guys are nuts. Why do you love each other like that? Why are you so committed to each other? Why are you so devoted to each other? Why are you so invested in each other like that? Jesus says, because this is the kingdom. The kingdom is marked by our love for one another. And so Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered him, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. And Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. Peter, like you and like me, is hung up on Judas. He's hung up on the logistics of the situation. Judas has walked out. It's night. It's dark. It's an oppressive feeling in the room. And I think, and again, I'm just sort of supplying my own interpretation of Peter's action, but I think Peter's looking at Jesus like, what did you do? Why did you let him go? What are you thinking, Jesus? And in Peter's mind, he's like, I'm ready to die for you. I'm ready to give my life for you. I love you that much. I'm that devoted. I'm that committed to you. I'm that all in on you. The irony, right, is that Jesus says, Peter, not only are you not willing to lay down your life for me in this moment, you're going to deny that you even know who I am 3 times. And what Peter does is the thing that we do, right, is he misses the point. He's focused on Judas and he's missing Jesus. He's looking at Judas walking out the room and he's looking and he's saying, why on earth are we allowing this to happen? And if this goes badly, I'll be the first one to step up. I'll be the first one to stand in front of Jesus if this goes the way that we think it's going to go. I'm all in. And Peter's got this really bad understanding of what this is all about because he thinks it's all about him. But the gospel is not that we would die for Jesus. The gospel is that he would die for us. Like that's, Jesus is saying, hey, stop missing the point, Pete. You're missing it. You're focused on Judas. Focus on me. See what's about to happen. Don't worry about Judas. Worry about me. And if you genuinely love me, then worry about the rest of the guys sitting at the table. Because your mark of love and devotion and obedience to me is not whether or not you're willing to die for me. It's about, are you willing to love these people the way that I have loved you? We'll see later on as we sort of work through this last speech that Jesus gives, how pivotal this passage is. But I think what we can recognize is that this commandment that Jesus gave to those early disciples, this is the thing that fueled the way that they changed the world. They didn't just give lip service to this. They actually believed that the thing that Jesus said was going to identify them was the thing that they should give themselves to. They should love each other so sacrificially, so radically, and with so much devotion, with so much commitment to each other, that people would look at them and say, I don't know what it is about you guys. I don't understand where that kind of love comes from. And do you know how they would answer that over and over again? They would say, that kind of love comes from our King who loved us this way. We have been so radically loved by our King that we are willing to give ourselves away in service to one another over and over and over again at our own expense. It is a commandment. When Jesus said, love each other as I have loved you, it's a commandment that it's not an exaggeration to say that commandment has literally changed the face of the earth. The world is different because Jesus sat in the room in the moment of his greatest betrayal, looked at the 11 men in the room, said, it's not about whether or not you're willing to die for me. It's about whether or not you are willing to love one another the way that I have loved you. If Jesus' movement is still meant to be ongoing, in and through us who generation after generation after, I don't know how many generations we're at since Jesus. But here's what I suspect. That part of the reason that you were attracted to a church community at some point or another is because you saw a group of people who really loved each other. And part of the reason that you walked away from some church communities is because you saw people who, instead of loving one another, sought vengeance on one another for the things that had been done and the things that they had done to one another. And we don't have time, right, to apologize for all the things that churches have done to each other. I mean, we would literally be here from now until eternity, probably, if we were to list out all of the ways in which we as followers of Jesus have failed to live this out. But I still believe that the Jesus following movement is the hope of the world. I still believe that the church, as absolutely imperfect and blemished and messy and sick as we can be, is still Jesus's mission and message extended to the world. And so the question that we've got to wrestle with is this: how willing are you to love one another as Jesus loved you? That's it. It's not, what's the evangelism strategy and what's the marketing strategy and how do we, capitalize on social media and how do all of that sort of stuff. I mean, all that stuff happens and it's all a piece of what we do, and I get all of that. But at the end of the day, right, like that's not what the church is about. The church is about how willing are you to love one another as Jesus loved you, even when it hurts, even when it's painful, even when people take advantage of you, even when they betray you, even when they stab you in the back. How willing are you to say, instead of pulling them close and say, I know it was you, Fredo, how willing are we to let that go? And say, because of what Jesus did for me, I'll love you. I'll love you because of the way that Jesus loved me. How willing are you to love one another as Jesus loved you? That is the mark of the Jesus-following community. That's the thing that changed the world. It is still, I'm convinced, the thing that can change the world again is when Jesus's men and women decide, this is the way. This is the way. I'll love like you loved me. Would you pray with me this morning? Jesus, I'm grateful that you as difficult as it must have been that you didn't pull Judas close and try to stop him. It would have made sense to me. It would have made sense to everybody that was in the room watching. It would have made sense to Peter and John and every single one of us if we had had the opportunity. And instead, out of love and out of obedience, you allowed those events to transpire and unfold. You let Judas walk out the door, and you walked yourself to the cross, and you demonstrated the fullness of your love for us. And Jesus, today, there are so many ways and moments and times in which we have failed to live out this commandment that we would love each other as you've loved us. And some of us are sitting in this room this morning and we are hurt because other people have not loved us the way that you loved. Some of us, we feel that notion for vengeance and that inclination to get back and get even. I pray in this community, in this church, this group of people, that we would be the kind of people who love one another as you've loved us. That we would allow that to work in us and through us in this community. And that as we do, the people who watch us and the people who see us and the people who know us would know that we belong to you because of the way that we love. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.